There are moments in life when love does not arrive as desire, but as disruption. Not the kind that flatters the ego, but the kind that unsettles the architecture of who you believe yourself to be. When symbols repeat, when dreams feel charged, when your inner world grows restless without obvious cause, something within you is preparing for contact. Not merely with another person, but with a forgotten dimension of yourself. The appearance of a younger person in your path is not accidental. Youth here does not signify age, but vitality and uncorrupted energy that has not yet learned to armor itself against disappointment. This person carries what you once possessed and later buried: openness without naivety, strength without rigidity, affection without bargaining. Their presence activates something dormant, something that time alone could not revive. Love of this kind is rarely gentle at first. It does not soothe, it confronts. It exposes the habits you built to survive loveless seasons, your emotional economy, your guardedness, your silent agreements to accept less than your soul demanded. Through their gaze, you are seen not as who you have become, but as who you abandoned. And that recognition is both terrifying and redemptive. This connection is not meant to rescue you, it is meant to awaken you. The younger soul does not come to be taught, but to remind. Their affection is not admiration, it is resonance. They respond to the parts of you that are alive beneath the scars, not the persona present to the world. And because of this, the bond feels unfamiliar. You may mistake it for fate, or fear it as illusion, but in truth it is initiation. You are not being offered comfort. You are being invited into integration. This love forces a reckoning between who you are and who you could become if you allowed yourself to live without self-betrayal. It asks whether you will cling to safety or risk sincerity, whether you will remain loyal to your defenses or surrender the truth. When such love appears, it is not a promise of permanence, it is a threshold. What matters is not how long the person stays, but what part of you awakens while they are near. If you can receive this love without shrinking, without control, without fear disguised as wisdom, you will leave the encounter transformed, less fragmented, more whole, and closer to the life that has been waiting for your consent. Love does not always announce itself with warmth or reassurance. Sometimes it enters quietly, almost violently, disturbing the inner balance you worked hard to maintain. This kind of love does not seduce the imagination with promises of happiness or completion. Instead, it interrupts the familiar order of your inner life. Thoughts you believed settled resurface without permission. Emotional reactions emerge that feel disproportionate, confusing, even inconvenient. You may find yourself unsettled not because something is wrong, but because something true has been touched. Psychological disruption is often the first sign that the soul has encountered a force it can no longer negotiate with using old strategies. Romantic fantasy flatters the ego. It reassures you that you are desired, chosen, special. Disruptive love does the opposite. It strips away the illusions you have constructed to feel safe. It exposes the unconscious agreements you made with yourself to avoid vulnerability, the belief that love must be controlled, that attachment must be managed, that emotional depth is dangerous. When such love appears, it does not align with your expectations. It challenges your self-image and reveals contradictions between how you see yourself and how you actually relate. This friction creates discomfort. But it is precisely this discomfort that signals inner movement. You may notice resistance rising from within, a desire to rationalize, to minimize, to retreat into detachment or intellectual explanation. These reactions are not signs of wisdom. They are protective reflexes shaped by past wounds. Psychological disruption occurs because this love bypasses your defenses. It speaks directly to layers of the psyche that have remained untouched by ordinary relationships. It awakens questions you thought were already answered. What do I truly want? What have I been avoiding? Who am I when I am no longer performing strength or independence? Unlike fantasy, this love does not offer escape. It offers confrontation. It brings you face to face with unresolved grief, unmet needs, and unexpressed longing. You may feel younger and older at the same time, revived by intensity yet burdened by self-awareness. This inner tension can feel destabilizing because it demands responsibility. You can no longer blame circumstance or timing. The encounter reveals that much of what you called maturity was, in truth, carefully disguised fear. As the disruption deepens, identity itself begins to loosen. Roles you relied on no longer feel convincing. Emotional patterns you repeated automatically now appear hollow. You may feel exposed, even foolish, for wanting what you once dismissed as unrealistic. But beneath this vulnerability lies an invitation, not to regress into fantasy, but to mature beyond emotional numbness. Psychological disruption signals that the psyche is reorganizing itself around a more honest center. This kind of love does not promise safety, and it does not guarantee reciprocity in the way the ego desires. What it offers is clarity. It reveals the cost of self-protection and the quiet violence of living without emotional truth. If romantic fantasy is a dream designed to comfort, disruptive love is an awakening designed to realign. It does not arrive to complete you, but to dismantle what prevents you from becoming whole. The appearance of a younger person in one, as emotional landscape carries a meaning that goes far beyond age or attraction. It represents vitality in its purest form, an energy that has not yet been shaped by prolonged disappointment or disciplined into emotional caution. This vitality is not recklessness. It is aliveness. It moves without calculation, speaks without excessive self-monitoring, and feels without immediately questioning whether those feelings are justified. When such a presence enters your life, it often feels disarming because it contrasts sharply with the emotional economy you have learned to live by. Unguarded emotional truth is unsettling to those who have survived by restraint. Over time, experience teaches the psyche to filter, edit, and delay expression. Feelings become measured, responses controlled, and desires negotiated internally before they are ever revealed. The younger person has not yet perfected these defenses. Their emotional honesty is not a strategy, it is a state. They react before they protect, feel before they analyze, and connect before they calculate outcomes. This directness exposes the distance you have traveled from your own emotional immediacy. What is stirred in you is not envy of youth, but recognition. Their vitality mirrors a part of yourself that once existed before caution became wisdom and restraint, masqueraded as maturity. You may feel simultaneously inspired and threatened, drawn toward their openness while wanting to distance yourself from its implications. This tension arises because their presence silently questions the necessity of your defenses. If they can remain emotionally open without collapsing, what have you been protecting yourself from all this time? The younger person, as emotional truth, operates as a living symbol. It does not argue or persuade, it simply exists. Through everyday gestures, unfiltered reactions, and spontaneous affection, they demonstrate an alternative way of relating to the world. This can feel destabilizing because it bypasses intellectual justification. You cannot easily dismiss it as naive without also confronting the emotional cost of your own guardedness. Their sincerity reveals how much emotional vitality has been sacrificed in the name of safety. Vitality is contagious, but it is also demanding. Being near it awakens dormant desires, forgotten hopes, and unrealized aspects of identity. You may find yourself feeling more alive in their presence, yet more aware of your own emotional fatigue. This contrast is not meant to shame, but to illuminate. It shows where life has narrowed, where expression has been constrained, and where truth has been postponed in favor of stability. The younger person does not arrive to be molded or corrected. Their role is symbolic rather than instructional. They carry the emotional permission you revoked from yourself long ago, the permission to feel without apology, to express without preemptive defense, and to desire without self-censorship. Encountering this unguarded truth challenges you to decide whether maturity must always mean emotional containment, or whether true maturity includes the courage to remain alive, responsive, and sincere even in the presence of uncertainty. Survival often demands a quiet violence against the self. In order to endure disappointment, rejection, or emotional instability, certain parts of the psyche are asked to go silent. Needs are postponed, sensitivities are numbed, and spontaneous impulses are restrained until they no longer feel like options. Over time, this becomes an identity. You learn who to be by learning what not to feel. What once was a temporary adaptation hardens into a permanent way of relating to life, and the suppressed parts remain dormant, not dead, waiting for a condition safe enough to return. When a meaningful connection appears, it does not create these hidden parts, it activates them. The sudden reemergence of long-forgotten feelings can feel confusing or even inappropriate. You may experience heightened emotional responses, unexpected vulnerability, or a renewed sense of longing that seems out of proportion to the situation. This is not regression. It is recall. The psyche recognizes an environment that allows what was buried to surface without immediate threat. The connection functions as a signal that survival is no longer the only priority. Suppressed parts often include the most vital elements of the self: tenderness, creativity, desire, emotional expressiveness, and the capacity to hope without guarantees. These qualities were not eliminated because they were weak, but because they made you permeable. In moments when openness led to pain, the psyche learned to equate feeling deeply with danger. Suppression became a form of self-loyalty. Yet, what protected you also diminished you, narrowing the range of experience available to you and replacing aliveness with control. As these parts begin to awaken, resistance naturally arises. You may feel exposed, uncertain, or destabilized by your own reactions. Old internal narratives attempt to reassert authority, reminding you of past disappointments and urging restraint. This inner conflict reflects a tension between the self that survived and the self that wants to live fully. Neither is wrong. One carries wisdom, the other carries vitality. The connection brings them into contact, forcing a negotiation that was long postponed. Awakening suppressed parts is not comfortable because it requires mourning. You may grieve the years spent emotionally constricted, the opportunities avoided, the expressions never voiced. Alongside grief comes anger at circumstances, at others, and often at yourself. These emotions are not signs of instability, but indicators of psychological thaw. Feeling returns in waves, sometimes overwhelming, because the psyche is relearning how to metabolize experience without retreating into numbness. The connection does not demand that you abandon your survival skills. It asks that you update them. What once required suppression may now require integration. The parts of yourself that learn to hide are not childish or obsolete. They are unfinished. Allowing them to speak does not undo your strength. It deepens it. As they awaken, identity expands. You become less defined by what you endured and more by what you are capable of feeling, choosing, and becoming when survival no longer dictates the limits of your inner life. Not all love arrives to soothe or reassure. Some forms of love come with an unsettling precision, aimed directly at the structures you built to keep yourself intact. These structures, often mistaken for personality or maturity, are defenses shaped by experience. They regulate closeness, manage expectation, and protect against disappointment. Comforting love works within these boundaries, offering warmth without disturbance. Confrontational love does not negotiate with them. It exposes their presence and questions their necessity. Defenses are not failures of character. They are intelligent responses to pain. Over time, they become automatic, invisible even to the one who relies on them. Emotional distance, self-sufficiency, humor, rationalization, and control can all function as armor. This love does not attempt to dismantle these protections by force. It simply renders them ineffective. You may notice that strategies which once kept you safe no longer work. Detachment feels hollow, composure feels strained, and control feels exhausting. The love persists, not by demanding vulnerability, but by remaining present enough that avoidance loses its power. Unlike comfort, which reassures the nervous system by confirming what is already known, this love introduces uncertainty. It invites questions rather than answers. You may feel unsettled not because something is wrong, but because something is being revealed. The defenses you depended on begin to show their cost. You see how much emotional life was filtered, delayed, or denied in order to remain protected. This recognition can feel threatening because it destabilizes the identity you constructed around resilience. Confrontation in this context is not aggression. It is clarity. This love reflects you back to yourself without distortion. It does not collude with your self-concepts or adapt itself to your comfort zones. Through simple presence, sincerity, or emotional availability, it highlights the distance between who you are when defended and who you are when open. The discomfort that follows is not imposed by the other, but generated internally as your psyche grapples with contradiction. You may find yourself oscillating between attraction and withdrawal. One part of you longs for the aliveness this love awakens, while another warns of risk. This tension reveals that comfort was purchased at the expense of intimacy. Defenses kept pain at bay, but they also limited connection. Confrontational love does not ask you to abandon safety recklessly. It asks you to become conscious of the walls you no longer need. What makes this love transformative is its refusal to rescue. It does not rush to soothe your fears or soften its impact to preserve your equilibrium. In doing so, it respects your capacity to grow. Comfort maintains the status quo. Confrontation initiates change. As defenses are exposed, choice returns. You can continue to live from protection, or you can risk responsiveness. The love itself does not decide for you. It simply creates the conditions in which self-deception becomes difficult and authenticity becomes possible. Some bonds enter life not to be leaned on, but to be passed through. Their purpose is not to replace inner authority or provide emotional scaffolding, but to initiate a process that draws fragmented parts of the self into relationship with one another. Dependency seeks fusion, relief, and certainty. Integration seeks coherence, responsibility, and wholeness. Difference is subtle but decisive, and misunderstanding it can lead to confusion about the true function of the connection. Dependency emerges when the psyche assigns another person the task of regulation. Emotions are stabilized through proximity, validation, or reassurance. While this can feel soothing, it quietly transfers power outward. Integration moves in the opposite direction. The bond activates internal material that demands attention rather than comfort. Feelings intensify, contradictions surface, and unresolved tensions become visible. Instead of calming the inner world, the connection amplifies it, insisting that what was split or avoided be acknowledged and reconciled. Initiation is rarely gentle. It involves crossing a threshold without guarantees. In such a bond, you may feel more alive yet less certain, more present yet less controlled. This paradox often triggers fear, as the ego searches for familiar signs of attachment, exclusivity, permanence, or reassurance. When these are not immediately available, the bond can be misread as unstable or unsafe. In truth, it is destabilizing only to the extent that all organizing principles no longer suffice. Integration requires that projections be reclaimed. At first, the other may seem to embody qualities you admire or lack vitality, freedom, emotional courage, or sincerity. Dependency would demand possession of these qualities through the relationship. Integration demands recognition that these qualities are latent within you. The bond functions as a mirror, not a source. As this realization deepens, idealization dissolves, and responsibility returns to the self. This process can be disorienting because it removes familiar roles. You are neither savior nor saved, neither teacher nor student in a simplistic sense. The bond resists hierarchy. Instead, it invites mutual recognition without fusion. Emotional intensity is not used to bind, but to reveal. When longing arises, it is not meant to be anesthetized by reassurance, but examined for what it points to within your own unfinished development. An initiation changes the initiate regardless of outcome. Whether the bond continues or ends is secondary to what has been integrated through it. Dependency fears separation because it threatens stability. Integration survives separation because it has internalized what was awakened. The bond as value lies not in how long it lasts, but in how it reorganizes the psyche. By refusing to become a crutch, it preserves dignity on both sides and ensures that what emerges is not attachment born of lack, but connection born of completeness. Some encounters enter your life with a precision that feels almost intentional, as if arranged by forces beyond conscious choice. Their intensity often creates the illusion that they are meant to last, that depth must naturally imply duration. Yet not all meaningful connections are designed to remain. Some exist to alter the internal landscape, to initiate a shift that could not occur in their absence. When judged by the standards of permanence, these encounters may appear incomplete or unstable. When understood through the lens of transformation, their purpose becomes clear. Permanence appeals to the ego's need for security. It promises continuity, predictability, and protection from loss. Transformation demands something different. It requires surrendering the belief that value is measured by how long something stays. A transformative connection disrupts familiar emotional patterns and brings dormant aspects of the self into consciousness. It challenges outdated narratives about love, worth, and identity. In doing so, it cannot remain static. To stay unchanged would betray its function. Such connections often feel urgent, as if time is condensed. Emotions move quickly, insights arrive unexpectedly, and inner shifts occur with unusual speed. This intensity is not a guarantee of longevity, but a sign of concentrated psychological work. The psyche recognizes an opportunity for change and accelerates the process. You may feel exposed, awakened, or reoriented, as if a hidden axis within you has been rotated. This can be exhilarating and destabilizing at once. Transformation involves loss. As the inner structure reorganizes, old attachments loosen. Beliefs that once defined you no longer fit. You may grieve the image of the future you imagined with this person, mistaking the end of a phase for the loss of meaning. Yet meaning is not erased when form changes. What was awakened does not disappear when the relationship shifts or concludes. It becomes internalized, shaping how you relate to yourself and others going forward. When permanence is prioritized, fear governs behavior. Efforts to preserve the connection may override honesty, growth, or autonomy. Transformation requires the opposite. It asks for presence without possession, commitment to truth rather than outcome. In this space, the connection is allowed to fulfill its role without being forced into a structure it cannot sustain. Letting go becomes an act of respect, not failure. A connection meant for transformation leaves you altered even in absence. You carry forward expanded awareness, increased emotional capacity, and a clearer sense of self. What remains is not the person, but the integration of what they activated. In this way, the encounter succeeds precisely because it does not promise permanence. Its purpose is fulfilled when you are no longer who you were before it began, and when the life that follows bears the imprint of that inner change. So if this love has entered your life, do not measure it by how long it stays or how perfectly it fits your expectations. Measure it by what it awakens, by the truths it forces you to face, and by the parts of yourself that refuse to return to sleep afterward. Some connections are not meant to be held onto, they are meant to be carried within. When you honor the transformation rather than cling to the form, you step forward altered, more honest, more integrated, and less afraid of becoming who you were always meant to be.